Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. So, boosting retention through employee engagement. So, how Harts Group is beating the vacancy rate challenge. So, I'm just going to share my screen, and to kick off, I thought it'd be nice for us just to do some quick introductions. So, I'll kick off from a WorkBuzz side. So, hi everyone, I'm Hayley, a senior customer success manager here at WorkBuzz. So, I've been at WorkBuzz now for over 2 years. And I primarily look after our hospitality and retail clients here at WorkBuzz. So it's really good that I'm able to join today's webinar alongside Jon. So Jon, did you want to kick off with an introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone, great to be here and thanks for having me, Hayley. I've spent the last 2 years as head of HR at the Harts Group, and that is a collection of premium restaurants around London, such as Barafina and El Pastor. There's also a private members club and a wine bar to boot. So a nice eclectic mix, lots going on all the time.
Great, thank you. Right, let's jump straight into it, straight into the questions then, Jon.
Great.
So, oh, sorry, just seeing Hayley popping up on the chat. So yeah, as we're going through, everybody, if you've got any questions as we're going through, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A box. We will absolutely make time for questions. I'll try read some as we're going through and talking with Jon, but then we'll also make sure that we save time at the end as well to answer any questions that do come up. So please put all of your questions in the Q&A and we will get to them. So in terms of Harts Group then, so what kickstarted your current employee engagement journey? What were the main drivers behind this, and were there any particular challenges you were facing in your workforce?
Right, so I mean, first and foremost, we didn't start with engagement in mind at all, funnily enough, coming to engagement experts like yourself. We actually just wanted to know what people were thinking, what they were really sort of believing about our business, or if everything we were saying was happening. So it was really an intelligence gathering exercise we started with. We noticed that there was a really acute point of people leaving our business before their probation, so before 90 days, before their first 3 months. And although there was plenty of anecdotal evidence or people's opinions, we didn't have any data. We didn't really know what it was we needed to fix. So before setting off on a crusade to turn around the turnover, we thought the best thing to do was get some information. So we turned to our friends at WorkBuzz and put out a survey to really ask the question, what is it we could be doing better? What does a great company look like? What do you need us to focus on? What should we be focusing on? What are we doing well? What are we not doing so well? So really just looking for feedback, as brutal as it was. And that was really the main starting point for us as a company.
Could you tell before you came to WorkBuzz in terms of the differences between like the deskless workers versus people in the support office? Could you tell just by looking at it that it was varying engagement levels?
Absolutely, yeah. So Harts Group being a hospitality business, the vast majority of the team there are deskless. So in fact, you had over 100 and only 109 of the 500 odd people who work there have an email address, and that's a work email address that they don't always all check all the time, and only 35 of those people are based in an office. So it's really difficult to get any kind of mass communication with a reliability behind it. We have to rely on things like WhatsApp, which aren't that reliable in terms of the translation of the message going through the teams. So yeah, it was incredibly difficult, and you could really tell when you walk into any of the venues or any of the sites or any of the people on the call, if you've just got locations and it's not even a customer facing building, it really was down to the person who runs that particular location as to how kind of engaged or how much energy there that the team displayed. So it's very obvious on a kind of visual element of when you walked into a building.
No, that makes sense. So you approached WorkBuzz and started to run surveys with us. So what did your employee engagement survey cycle look like?
So we start off with the main question, and this year it will be changing again. But as I said, at the start of our 12-month cycle, it was why are people leaving in the first 90 days? What is it that we're getting wrong? Or what is it that we're sort of promising and not fulfilling? So our starting point is the senior team, key focus, key questions. What do we really want to find out? What are we going to use the survey for? Then there's the survey message calendar, or the carrying out of the survey itself. And I think we'll come on to that in just a moment.
Yeah.
After we've got that survey, it's then digesting the data, looking at it with 500 and odd people, 50 odd questions. There's a lot of responses to go through, a lot of data to sift through. So you need to start placing that into themes or workable, communicatable language that you can talk in your senior teams and your managers about. From there, you break out into a leader's presentation. So this is what we've taken from the survey. These are the themes that we've put together, and then invite people to be part of focus groups. And this is the really key stage, I think, because getting people to take part in a survey initially is a challenge in itself. When you've got that data, being anonymous, which is a strength, you sometimes lack a bit of the detail. So you've got the data from numbers wise, you've got the feedback in the comments, but you might not have the answers to questions you asked. So you take those focus groups, you take the data from the survey, and you put it to those groups again, still anonymously, and say, look, we're not asking you to put your hand up if you criticized us on this point, but we've taken this message from your answer. Is that right? Are we on the right path? Are we barking up the wrong tree? Have we got the right meaning in your feedback? And so really keeping the people part of the process, making sure that you're generating that buy-in all the time. That's a really crucial point, and that goes on for a couple of months. When you've got that data, those answers, that sort of further feedback, the more detailed feedback, then you can go into constructing what it is you're doing, building cost into the next budget round, which helps, because once people have agreed to the budget, it's hard for them to say no at a later date. And then it's really important to have some kind of visual example or presentation of you said, we did. So making sure you're drawing that line for people, even though they might have been involved in the process, they might have been in the focus groups, they've all got things going on. They've all got site visits, they've got to get on with their job, they've got customers, they've got P&L meetings, they've got everything going. So it's really important to at the end of that, make sure that you can sew it all together for them and say, you gave us this feedback back then, we did this straight away. We've been working on that, as you know, and we're really excited to announce that this is going to be happening. And then you start the cycle all over again.
Yeah, that's so important. The whole you said, we did is key. Like, if you're not telling everyone like what you've done off the back of the survey, then almost what was the point of doing it in the first place? So yeah, absolutely key in terms of communicating that out. And just drilling into what you said about the focus groups, how did you go about approaching and pulling together those focus groups?
So, I mean, well, you really want to avoid sort of dragging people along, because it's like, you must give us your feedback.
Yeah, you will be part of this group.
So we always start with an open invitation, and you hope that you get those people. And to be fair, I mean, I find an effective focus group, really, you don't want more than 15 people maximum. So of the 540 odd 550 employees, we didn't really have problem attracting that number of people. And with that number, it means that you can have a useful discussion, and it doesn't become one of those kind of, it's not difficult to manage. What you do need to aim for, though, is a good cross section across the companies, particularly again from a hospitality perspective. We focus a lot on front of house, back of house, so kitchens, the customer facing roles, but equally then the office teams. You want to make sure there's like an inclusive element however you build those focus groups.
Absolutely. And did you find that you got a good mixture from all of the different sites? Was it some of people in the support office? You had a good...
The office is often the hardest one.
To
get people to come to. Those are the people you do have to eventually drag up. But yes, the site's taken part, absolutely. I think there was I mean, again, this would be, I guess, a unique or not necessarily a standard reaction, but there was a genuine excitement to saying, to launching a feedback process on this scale, to saying that we really want to know what you think. Don't worry, no one's going to know what you say, who you are. The anonymity is a really key point. But tell us, we want to be better. And I think there was an excitement about people, almost a surprise, going, great, wow, I can say anything, brilliant, I'll tell you, do this.
No, that's great. And then just in terms of your restaurant, so with the deskless employees, how did you encourage them to take part? Your response rate, obviously we'll get onto that in a bit more detail, but 70% response rate, which just for people watching this, average response rate for a deskless industry is probably about 60 to 65%. So to get 74% is really, really good. So yeah, how did you go about encouraging responses?
Yeah, so I was massively inspired by still the greatest program that's ever been on telly, The West Wing, and they talk about a message calendar trying to get re-elected, and essentially it's the idea that you just talk about the same thing whenever you have the opportunity. You know, not in front of the press. We weren't doing the press room in the White House quite so much, but any opportunity. So briefings, you know, company emails, newsletters, one-to-ones, individual as well as group communications. We really set a sort of a 5-week program on a communications calendar, where this would really be what the company spoke about, what every manager spoke about to their teams, so that there was no one who could claim that they hadn't heard of it. You know, it was a real sort of combined collaborative effort. So this kind of boots on the ground approach, where you start with the idea that it's communicated in everything that you do. So if it's a one-to-one, you know, don't forget what we've talked about today was really important, but you'll have a chance to give further feedback. If you didn't feel like saying anything to me in this survey, make sure you do it in team briefings. So always making it a point to make sure everyone was aware of that, and not just doing it once, but over and over again. You need repetition. And then for the 3 weeks of the survey, again, it was this team of canvassers going up and down all of the locations. So whether that is just in London or whether it's across sites, if it's a area chef going to train someone, they can talk about it. If it's an ops manager going somewhere, if it's one of your people team, whoever it is traveling around those buildings, it's when they're there to make sure they ask people, have you had your chance yet? Have you filled in that survey? You know, it's really important. You've got to do that. And then having the weekly completion figures allows you to focus that where it's needed towards the end. So those sites that are, you know, we benchmarked 70% as where we wanted to achieve, and it was fantastic to get 74. But in the last week, it did feel a bit like an election campaign, you know, knocking on managers' doors. Have you completed the survey? Have your teams, you know, has everyone done it?
Yeah, I think as well, it's the managers, and I guess it can't all fall on you as a HR team. Like, you need to make sure you've got the managers buy-in, and like, you can't do it all.
Absolutely, yeah. Letting go was a big thing personally for me, like a learning point. I think when you know, I'm very passionate about these things, and I believe it can be done. I believe it can be done in this way, and you know, I think naturally you just want to hold the process. You want to communicate the process yourself to everyone. You want to make sure they get the same enthusiastic sort of passion about it for reasons. So you know, it would have been impossible for me to do that with a company of the size on my own. So you really do have to kind of let other people just do it. And actually, it's I look back and go, well, why wouldn't you? That's madness to try and do it. Well, I can have a team of 30 people to help me. Brilliant. Definitely bring the enthusiasm, bring the idea, but then work with your team. Ultimately, I think as an office, we're a resource. We're there to help the sites. We're there to basically support whatever it is we're offering our customers. So it makes sense that everyone gets behind it. Yeah,
and it's key that all the employees know why you're doing it, what's in it for them. Like, you're doing this survey because you want to make it a better place to work.
Absolutely.
So absolutely key. So survey closed, results came in. What did the results show, and what actions have you made as a result?
So I'd say like nothing groundbreaking. I think that's one of the things. There's a tendency to want to find like this next big thing, or the solution, or the thing that's gonna, you know, fix it. But ultimately what came back were really tangible, practical steps that we were able to action that had an impact. And so I don't apologize for the next few minutes being sort of things that everyone maybe has heard of, but I think bear in mind that it's a bit like working with a friend or those people closest to you. It's very easy to forget about that. It's very easy just to assume that those things will always be there or will always be done. So being reminded about it is actually really useful. So some of the things that came up, we gave them themes, as I said, because there were tens of thousands of responses. There's no way to address each one individually. So the predominant theme was around well-being or wellness. And this was fantastic to see because you hear about it being spoken about it a lot. So it was good that that kind of tied into the general kind of zeitgeist of opinion. But it wasn't like we want free gym memberships or, you know, we'd like yoga classes. It was far more practical things, as I said, like we'd like the rota to be sent out 10 days in advance, you know, not the day before. We'd like to not do 15-hour shifts every day. We'd like to not do 6 doubles a week, if that's even possible. So those were really opportune things that we could change straight away, you know, not immediately overnight. You don't want a knee-jerk reaction, but there were things that we could do very visibly that said, you know, acknowledged we heard you, which was the first step in that cycle that I described. So people can see change starting to happen almost straight away. And from that really was a wellness charter, because in hospitality, I suppose, like most businesses, it would be foolish to sort of fence yourself in, or a commitment where ultimately in the business of saying yes, as we are, if someone comes along and wants to book a venue, you can't say, well, the rota's already gone out, we can't take a booking. So with that in mind, I think a charter meant we are serious. We want to deliver this, we will deliver it, with the understanding that occasionally we might need you to come in and help with this as we know around Christmas time. So that was the main theme that lots of it fed into. The others that came from it really dovetailed into that. So communication, not just being the general way that we talk to each other, but communication around the role. What is it that's expected of that role in particular? How do I achieve progression if I want to? You know, what do I need to do to get the next role? And again, those things that seem very basic, seem very standard, but if you haven't looked at your job descriptions in a while, if you wrote them when you were on 4 sites and you've now got 12, those roles have changed. You know, if you wrote them when you joined the company 5 years ago, and, you know, those roles have changed. So I think it's important. We use this really to be reminded about lots of the basic things, whereas you want to focus on, you know, benefits review to make it look attractive and sexy and exciting. Ultimately, the teams don't mind about their benefits if they have a better quality of life because their rota's being on time and they don't have to work till 2 and then come in at 10. So some of those factors really resonated. So as well as the well-being, the communication, there was also an element that we found really interesting that we don't measure, or we don't have much demographic information on our teams. You know, it's on the job application forms, but it's optional. So we don't know necessarily the data behind the makeups of our teams. So we haven't been able to really focus on areas before. And there was a disparity between those who identify as male and those who identify as female of around 20 percentage points, which we really didn't see coming. Harts Group's got a really fantastic, strong female senior representation, I think more so than male. So it wasn't an obvious, oh, well, that's the problem we need to fix. So that was, again, a really important factor we took from the survey, that we were able, again, to bring forward a focus group and say, you know, this is what we think's come from that.
Yeah.
And they helped us understand that it was about things like opportunity of training, that sometimes rather than it just being an offer, however open the offer, sometimes you need to be a bit more proactive with that offer. So saying to people in their one-to-ones, this month we'd like you to take part in this training, or this month we are hosting this, which day can you come on, rather than just an open invitation to which certain groups of people will absolutely put their hand up and say, yes, I'm going to go, but we want to make sure that everyone's kind of almost encouraged. So proactive development was what came out of that.
I think, yeah, just listening to that, you say they might seem like obvious things, but they're such quick wins that have such a huge impact. Like, especially just going back to that rota one, like that, like you said, has a huge impact on people's well-being, just knowing 10 days in advance, and just things like that you're putting in place off the back of the survey. Like, they might seem small to you, but have a huge impact on your employees' engagement. So love that. We had a question just pop up, which I thought would be a good time to answer this now, because you just mentioned about focus groups again. So we had a question, who facilitated the focus groups? Was it an external party? Great question. So for each topic,
we identified people we would have liked to do it. Again, it's very difficult. You don't want to kind of say you're doing it. But I think it was whatever was relevant to the question. So if there was an area of the back of house or the kitchen teams we wanted to drill down in, we made a decision about whether the most appropriate person was maybe one of the head chefs, or whether in some cases actually the chefs wanted to talk to someone that was outside of their world. So would it be one of the general managers?
Yeah. At
the same time, we really wanted there to be an ownership within that kind of senior leadership team. So bringing external people in, it's a great idea. We wanted to make sure that the managers also felt part of these changes and this development drive. So where possible, I suppose it was an external person if it was from a different part of the business or different brand in the business.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was different for each person. I'm sorry if that is a more rambling answer than the person was hoping for.
Yes. So I know we've briefly touched on it, but since you started to put some of these actions in place, so things like the rota, etc., what impact have you seen happen across Harts Group, and what makes you proud about that?
So what was great about doing this is we had the standard metrics before. I say the standard metrics that lots of people I'm sure already measure, things like turnover, retention rates or vacancy rates. The survey itself gives you loads more metrics that you can measure year on year and see if you're improving at. But the two I think that really speak or hopefully speak to a wider audience that we're particularly proud of. So the vacancy rate and the turnover really hand in hand. The vacancy rate 2 years ago was around 19%, 20%. It was post-pandemic recovery. There was a lot of optimism, a lot of eyes on growth, but not necessarily the people to do that. You know, sites were being offered with rent-free periods, or still are in many cases.
Yeah.
But it was only the larger companies who had the ability to send in a ready-made team that could take those. So vacancy rates being around 20%. Now it's been around 5.6 to 6% for at least this year, at least December this year, if not just before. And then on top of that, the turnover figures overall. Turnover is something that lots of people in our industry often talk about and go, what's your turnover? And I never mind sharing it. I mean, I think all I'd say is turnover is so unique to a business in your business model or where you are or the stage you're at in your business. So it's not always useful, I believe, to benchmark against others. I think it's better to see where you are and establish where you'd like to be and judge that. So we reduced turnover by 12% over the last 12 months, which we were, again, really thoroughly proud of, which puts us now as a group about 114% turnover. So still high, but definitely 12% better than where we were a year ago.
Yeah.
And a demonstration of that impact of the work we've done to focus on reducing that 90-day turnover, which has a knock-on effect to everything else, really.
That's huge. That's amazing. In terms of tips for other organisations, so not just hospitality, I guess this kind of goes up to anybody with deskless workers. What would you say that they need to be doing to help improve their employee engagement? Right.
So I try, you may have noticed I chat on, so I try to keep this really brief. So I think number one, be really specific. So if you're doing an engagement survey or you want people to be engaged, bearing in mind that engagement has such a plethora of meanings that, what is it do you mean by engaged? So in our case, we wanted greater job satisfaction because we wanted to know why were people leaving, how could we make it better? So first of all, be really specific what it is you're trying to achieve or what it is you mean by engaged. Number two, bring people with you. Any change management process involves that, but just as general sort of sense really is that you can't do it as a crusade. I mentioned earlier about needing to let go, let other people. The most engaging, inspiring person will get to the end, turn around and find no one behind them, because people have got other priorities in their role. They need to understand why this is important and why they've got to see it through to the end, because ultimately you're asking people to go through an additional piece of work that they didn't have. So bringing people with you is key. Third one, take your time. This one was a bit of a personal one, because during the process of doing the survey, I saw loads of stuff online about the annual survey is dead, you know, do the pulse instead. And it made me really think, oh, you know, have I done something wrong here? Have I misinterpreted what it is I should be doing?
Yeah.
But that kind of 12-month process I described, it gives you the time. It really gives you the time to focus on what those results are. It gives you the time to hold the focus groups. It gives you the time to construct a meaningful change. It gives you the time to put the budget behind it. So whilst it isn't the most agile or, you know, or nimble thing, you know, it takes a while to steer the ship, whatever sort of words you want to pick from the HR dictionary. I was really proud of the change that we were able to enact because of the time we took. So I think take your time and have confidence in your own plan. And then finally, perhaps really obviously, but make sure you use the data and refer to it. So don't get the survey and go kind of, oh, that's interesting. Right, so we are going to open 5 more sites. Businesses have to be profitable to run, but your teams are what make the business profitable. The more engaged they are, the more profitable your business will become, as I'm sure we've all read many times. So I think make sure you refer to the data often. Make sure you're linking it back to the feedback that those teams have given you, so that they understand the changes you're making. And that's it. Those 4 things.
No, I love that. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think as an organization, you need to go at your pace of change. Like, what's the point in running a weekly survey if you can't make those actions every single week? It's, yeah, you need to go at the right pace for you as an organization. Just looking, so we've had some more questions come through from the audience. So question, can I ask the number of questions in the survey and how direct were the questions?
So I believe you might be able to correct me, Hayley. I think it was 47.
Yeah, it was about late 40s. It was. Yeah.
So 47 questions. We really were aiming for 45, but there were some that we really didn't want to take out. And in terms of direct, you know, I mean, there's some that come in the bank that any of your current clients or customers will know. Like, you know, are the senior leadership doing a good job? Are the senior leadership approachable and present? And that can be quite tough to read if it's red, if you see red next to those things. But then we also ask things about you know, current initiatives that we were doing. You know, is this showing value? I like to think they were fairly direct. We wanted warts and all feedback. You know, we wanted to know what it was we were getting wrong. Otherwise it's difficult to change stuff if everyone's very polite.
Absolutely.
So be prepared for some rough answers, I think.
And I think it was key in terms of the way that we designed the questionnaire was that we made it crystal clear on each section of the survey that people knew who they were talking about. So we had a section on senior leadership, but we made it crystal clear who are we talking about when they're answering on senior leadership. The same with local leadership, made that crystal clear. So I think when the survey results came in, nobody could say, well, they weren't talking about me, because we made that really clear on the survey to the employees. So almost made it direct. This is who you're thinking about when you're answering these questions. Yeah,
absolutely.
Please, we've still got quite 15 minutes, so please keep throwing in any more questions. But I'm just going to read another one that we had emailed through to us. So about the future of hospitality. So what does the future in hospitality look like, and what do you expect future challenges to be?
Wow. Okay.
Big question.
Future of hospitality and the challenges. I think hospitality is going to become more important. I think that I'm passionate about hospitality being, you know, as much a form of escapism, or people ultimately coming to enjoy themselves. You can cook at home, you can make good drinks at home, but you can't create the same experiences at home necessarily, even if you've got some of these kits that are amazing these days. So I think hospitality will become more important as people are under more and more pressure, as that's the way the world seems to be going. But I think the challenges, you know, the cost challenges are incredibly acute and tangible right now. Always being asked to do more with less, whether that's food, you know, products, the drinks, or the people that you work with. all of that's being squeezed. I don't see that changes in the short term, but I think the strength we have as an industry is that we are incredibly adaptable. We're very, very creative. We come up with the best ways of delivering things. Some of the best companies in our industry are people who used to do sort of street food or markets and have grown that experience out, or used to do pop-ups and have now opened up permanent restaurants. So I think the changes are going to stay similar to that, and I think we'll continue to adapt. And one thing I'd just add on to the end of that answer is, I think you've only got to look at a few years ago, people were getting quite concerned about the rising trend in no and low, that lower alcohol element, and is this no one's going to go to the pub anymore, and that hasn't happened. I think we've just been more creative with what it is we offer, and people have really embraced that element of it. The products have improved all the time, and it's been an exciting tangent of our business model. So yeah, I think really exciting.
I love that answer, thank you. So another question that's come through: so what is the main age demographic of your staff groups, and do you think that influence response rate levels?
So the age demographic of our staff members is actually 16 to 64. We started employing 16 and 17-year-olds under a trial that was very successful as a way to extend our business, our recruitment methods. The main section sits between, I think, late 20s and early 30s, as you might expect. In terms of the feedback models, in terms of the people who completed the survey, there was most of our older clientele. I mean, if what people are getting at is the deskless element and the technology element, is that a barrier? Absolutely not. If anything, it's the wider members of the team just can't be bothered, not necessarily people who don't know how to access it. I think one thing I would say, and not as a plug, but one of the best things, or the two best things about using WorkBuzz, and we did put out a tender process, which was that, number one, it's really intuitive, very easy to use on a phone, so people can complete it wherever they are. But crucially for our business, and I don't know how relevant this will be to the other industries on the call, but we had a lot of people with English not as their first language, and WorkBuzz was the only one that had the ability to really translate into the required languages, which they've just improved again. So it was really accessible, really inclusive, and I think that helped not only the overall completion rate, but the feeling amongst the team anyway.
Yeah, everyone feels included, and that actually goes nicely on to my next question, because you just mentioned about being able to complete on the phone. So what ways did you get the survey to staff? Email, text, etc.?
So we did send out emails, but I mean, I'm not sure of the data. I believe most people completed it on a mobile device, particularly when it was mentioned on site. They can be sent off to have their food or be given a short break in work to go and complete it on their phone. So I think most people, I'd be correct in saying, completed it on their mobile. Yeah,
and then just to dig into that one a little bit more. So in terms of WorkBuzz, majority of the time it goes out by email, but that can be to a personal email address or to a work email address, and like Jon said, that can be opened up on a mobile device, laptop, any internet device that you've got. But we do also do something called kiosk mode. So for those that don't have access to an email address, what we could do is set up a generic link, attach that to a QR code, you can put it on your posters, comms, etc. And we just supply a 6-digit code that means that anybody that doesn't have access to an email, their manager can give them the code. They can then open up the link and complete the survey again on any device. So yeah, like Jon said, it's quite good, especially if people don't have email addresses, setting up little stations where people can have access to have a 10-minute break, or take some time out of their working day to be able to go sit down and complete the survey. So yeah, there's a couple of ways that it can be done through WorkBuzz, not just by email. Any other questions that we've got coming through? Still got a few more minutes if anybody wants to pop any more questions in, or anything else, Jon, that you think would be relevant to the listeners in terms of overall engagement.
No, I think the main point is be clear about what you mean by engaged. So just reiterate that point. I think it's really important to have a clear focus that you try not to veer too far off the path for, but what is the problem you're trying to solve, or what is the why? And I didn't make these things up, you know, they're out there already, but I'd say that's the crucial point for me, because you get so much, it's easy to get lost in that data, especially when you get to break it down and see everything.
Another question, so how will you change your next annual survey?
So there was a lot of excitement actually around want to see how we did against this last year. So those people I said about bringing with you, you know, they're excited now to see how it continues to grow. So I think there's elements around following up on actions that you introduced. I think that's really important. So if you've taken things from the last piece of feedback and done something, whether it's an action or introduced something or a new way of working around that, asking feedback on that is one really crucial plan. I think we want to know, did we get that right? So you said we did, was it correct? And if not, we'll change it and then go through that again. I think the other part, there was some minor translation issues which are fascinating around in Spanish, when you say, do you feel safe at work, it means more confident. So we're going to make sure we go with a fine-tooth comb to make sure we get those words right. And I think the only other thing is, from my own perspective, is I'm going to hand over more of it early on. So rather than drive most of it and then hand over the kind of the feedback and focus group process, it really is now in the hands of the ops team to deliver. It needs to be. So it isn't the HR survey or you know, Jon's survey or anything like that. It's your say. So personally, I'm looking forward to taking the time off. But yeah, it's handing over more of it from the start is the main.
Booking a holiday when the survey goes live.
Yeah. And I'm apologies if that doesn't answer your question, but yeah, those are the main points. I definitely don't think we would reduce the questions, or we don't want to increase them by too many. I think it's
I think that you can see that trend in how things have changed since the last time that it was run. So yeah,
it's really useful data. So I think we'd keep as much of it the same as we can, just so you can see the change, whether it's up or down or in the middle.
Make sure things are moving in the right direction, like you said, be able to see, right, okay, we've made actions off the back of that. Has that actually moved the question in the right direction? Is going to be absolutely key. Thank you for all of your questions. Any more on the last couple of minutes that we've got? I'll just see if any more pop up. But thank you for all of those that have sent a question in so far. I will just give it a couple of minutes and see if anything pops up. So I guess between now and the next survey, it's just continue to work on the actions that you've got in place.
Yeah, finish off the delivery, really make the announcements, draw those lines, and as I said, start the process again. What is the key point? That was one.
Oh yeah. Do you offer any incentive to staff the completion of the survey?
No. And if you don't mind me referencing a previous company ages ago, I used to work for Revolution Revs, and we used to have Funky or EFT survey, which was a sort of a more basic version of this. And there was an incentive, and it basically led to you discounting the top 10 results that all came back at 100%, which you'd always see. You'd look at those sites and you'd think, so number 1 was actually number 11, who might have had a more realistic score. But no, I just think you want feedback like this to be as genuine. And I think if people don't want to fill it out, I mean, that's a kind of feedback in itself. I don't want to become all preachy or anything now. I'm sorry if that becomes it, but no, it was really crucial actually not to offer any form of incentive, because you want the incentive to be that you want to take part in the future of your company, your role. You want to tell us what you think, you want to be invested in it. So no, we didn't.
Thank you. Any tips to getting ops to take responsibility for actions? Good question.
So I think it's easier second time round. I think like anything you ask someone to do, you have to be able to demonstrate the value in it, or it's easier once you can demonstrate the value in it. So I think I'd love to give you tips for first time. I don't have any. I think this time around it's easier because they've seen the whole process. It's very much that kind of like learner driver, right, here you go, you take the wheel. So yeah, I think it really is, especially with ops, you know, I used to do it. You've got so much else going on all the time that when this, you know, happy person comes up to you and say, let's ask people what they think, you're sort of like, oh God, got things to do. But once you can see that that's led to, you know, higher attention and, you know, having to recruit less, or, you know, the skills growing more, or people being more enthused in your business, I think it's a lot easier to make that time for it. So yeah, I think really just take them through the process, or help them see the benefits of it as best you can. And then it is a lot easier to go, why don't you run it? Why don't you be in charge?
Yeah, they want to see their return on investment.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I can't, you can't go, right, this is on you from today, or send them to talk to me. I'll have a chat.
Yeah. Love that. And then another question. So how long did you give to have the survey completed? What is a realistic timeline?
So I can't remember whether it was us or you came up with this brilliant answer, but we ran 3 weeks because you want it to be, there's an element of urgency behind it to marry up with the kind of the campaign. They're like, this is happening, get your survey in, you haven't got long. But equally, if someone's got a 2-week holiday, you don't want to exclude them. So yeah. 3 weeks we felt was that sweet spot between capture all, or as many as possible, without making it sort of, oh, you've got 3 months to do it, don't worry about it, we'll send out another email to remind you in two months time. So yeah, 3 weeks I would highly recommend. And also it means that as a campaigner, you can give it 100% for 3 weeks and then book a week off.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. I think, yeah, in terms of, you're exactly right in terms of time frame. I mean, we'd always say at least a minimum of 2 weeks, and even then being clever about it, setting it to go midweek so that it goes over more calendar weeks. Just because if you have got anybody on holiday, then hopefully you're going to catch them either side of their 2-week holiday. So yeah, absolutely makes sense. I think so, just conscious of time, that is all of the questions that we have answered. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Jon for joining today's webinar, and thank you to all of you that have joined and listened to the conversation we've been having. Just in terms of next steps, so look out for an email from either Emily or Fiona at WorkBuzz in the next few days. So they will be sending out a copy of this webinar recording and also some additional resources that we have here at WorkBuzz. You'll also get an invitation to our next webinar, so on the 15th of August, creating and maintaining safe spaces. And then if there's anything that we didn't get the chance to answer today, or if there's any questions that you've got for myself or Jon, if you email them over to hello@workbuzz.com, then we can pass those over to Jon and get an answer for you. Or if there's just anything that you want to know about WorkBuzz, again, you can reach out on hello@workbuzz.com and one of the team will come back to you. So I think that is it. Thank you so much, Jon. Thank you for joining. Thank you to everybody again. Take care, and we will hopefully see you on the next webinar.